Proton is the official vehicle for the 19th Asian Games in Hangzhou, and to celebrate that, the company is doing a media drive where we can test out all three models in the X series. These include the X50, the X70 and of course the all-new X90. So, without further ado, let's get to the drive. So we are in the X90 now, and this is a nice big premium D segment SUV and it feels just like one. This is really an SUV that's catered to families who need 6 or 7 seats, because this can have a 6 or 7 seat configuration depending on which variant you get. This one is the flagship model, so you've got 6 seats including 2 captain seats in the middle of the SUV. Now, because this is a family-first SUV, in my opinion anyway, it is tuned for comfort, so the ride and handling certainly reflect this. It can smooth out road bumps very well, and even as you're going through speed strips, you can hear them, but you don't actually feel it inside the cabin, which is really quite impressive. But this level of comfort does come at a cost. The steering, for one, feels a little bit numb, and the suspension also feels quite soft, so you can't exactly take corners too aggressively with this car. Not that you should, because this is a big SUV and this is still a family-first car, again in my opinion. When it comes to performance though, the X90 is a relatively fast car. Although it has the same 1.5-litre turbo engine as the one found in the current X50 and X70, it does have a mild hybrid system as well, with a combined output of 190 PS and 300 Nm of torque. This car can reach highway speeds relatively quickly, and if you want to overtake a car, it can do just that as well, as and when you need to. The ride quality of the X90 is really excellent. Even above the national speed limit, this car remains pretty darn quiet inside this cabin. Of course, there are some wind noise at higher speeds, but tire roar is very minimal, and overall, this does feel like a premium SUV. The last thing that I'd like to highlight about the X90 is its ADAS, which is pretty darn sophisticated. It features level 2 semi-autonomous driving, and the biggest feature is definitely ICC, Intelligent Cruise Control. As its name suggests, it keeps the car centered in the lane, and it also matches the speed that you set or the car in front of you, because that's what Adaptive Cruise Control does. Even in a traffic jam, ICC can still keep the car central in the lane while keeping a relatively safe distance with the car in front. I wish the distance isn't quite as wide as it is, but normally Adaptive Cruise Control does leave quite a bit of space for safety reasons, of course, so there's that. Oh, it's also worth noting that this car has TSI, which stands for Traffic Sign Information. As you're driving and you're passing by the speed limit indicator, it will actually show up on the digital meter to show you what the speed limit is, which is quite neat. And that is our driving impression of the X90. Now we are in the X70, the very first Proton X series that was introduced here in Malaysia back in 2018. That being said, this is actually the 2022 model, which received an MC update, which stands for minor change, just last year. It brought a couple of changes, including the availability of a 1.5-litre turbo engine that sits under the hood of this premium trim. It's still the same turbo engine that's found on other X series models, so it still produces 177 PS and 255 Nm of torque. If you're concerned that this 1.5-litre engine is not powerful enough for this C segment SUV, do not be, because this is still a plenty fast car. Whether you're trying to overtake at speeds of about 80 to 90 km per hour, or you just want to get to highway speeds quickly, this car can do just that without kicking up a fuss. It still offers good ride and handling, of course, because this is a Proton model. While the ride quality is not quite as comfortable as the X90, it is certainly more comfortable than the X50, which has stiffer suspensions. As for the handling, it doesn't feel quite as sharp as the X50, but it does handle better than the X90 in my opinion. I do feel more confident taking corners at slightly higher speeds with this X70 than the X90. So with that in mind, it sits right in the middle of the X50 and X90, just as it does in terms of pricing. However, the X70 does lag behind both the X50 and the X90 when it comes to the ADAS. Unlike the other two SUVs, the X70 only supports ACC, which is Adaptive Cruise Control. It doesn't come with Intelligent Cruise Control, so it can only control the vertical speed of the car and not the horizontal controls, which is to say, it has no lane centering ability. This is understandable given that this was introduced back in 2018, which is 5 years ago, so yeah. However, there are rumors of an MC2 update for the X70, which is said to bring a couple of refinements that was available in the Geely Bouyer Pro, the car's twin model. These changes include both exterior and interior changes, which could really modernize this SUV, which is still very nice to drive, and it's ideal for folks who want a car that's not quite as big as the X90, but still bigger than the X50. And that is the X70, which is still a very good C-segment SUV. And we're back in a Proton X50. Surprisingly enough, this is actually the very same unit that we reviewed back in 2021. So after 2 years, I do have a somewhat new perspective on this SUV. Let's start with what remains the same. This is still a very fun SUV to drive. After all, it still has a relatively powerful 1.5-litre turbo engine that outputs 177 PS and 255 Nm of torque. And because this is a relatively small B-segment SUV, it really does feel very peppy and very eager to just go. On top of that, its ride and handling is still very good. It handles very well, the steering is responsive, and because it's again a smaller SUV, it feels very nimble and agile. But one issue that I face with the X50 is still relevant, at least with this particular unit, which is wind noise. And it's a very intrusive wind noise. When I'm driving at the national speed limit, for example, the wind noise is louder than the road noise, which is not a good thing at all. It is entirely possible that this issue has actually been fixed in later batches of the X50, and this is, after all, the same unit that we drove back in 2021. So yeah. And if it's still not addressed, at least there is rumor of a facelift X50, so maybe that will be fixed then. As for the X50's ADAS, I'm still very happy with it because the lane keep assist and the adaptive cruise control still works very well in a traffic jam. From what I can tell, the distance that it keeps from the car in front is also slightly shorter than, say, on the X90, which is great in my opinion because then other cars can just swoop in and take my spot in the traffic jam. Of course, speaking of the X90, the X50 does not have several features of the X90's ADAS, such as the ability to read traffic road signs. And that is the Proton X50. So that was Proton's Asian Games Nation Drive media event, and it was definitely fun to try out all three cars in the X series. Chances are both the X50 and X70 could be facelifted or have some changes here and there by the end of the year or even early next year, and we'll definitely keep a close eye on that on nextriff.com. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe to our channel, especially if you want to see more content like this on our YouTube channel, and of course stay tuned for more good stuff to come here and nextriff.com.